Right. I see a phone joining, which I'm guessing is Senator Erickson. But we can confirm that.
Welcome, Senator. Good to see you.
Good morning, everyone.
Thanks for joining.
Would you
Lindsay,
prefer that I wait to call the meeting to order until we have a quorum?
for sure, we wait till 9, and we can't take any votes without one more member present, but we can have, we could, well, can we call the meeting without a quorum, or is it just voting? I think we can meet. I think we can't vote, so we could give it a couple. We have a couple more minutes, so let's
Okay.
cross that bridge in a moment.
I'm going to go ahead and start the screen share.
Okay.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock, so I will call this meeting to order at this point. Lindsay, can you give us a report on whether we have a quorum at this point?
I see Deanne Graham and Delise Hopeland joining just now. So I'm going to go ahead and start the recording so we can be official. And then I think, Melissa, if you agree, I'll turn it over and you all are good to go.
Yep, we have a quorum done.
Lindsay, I'm sorry, this is Deanne. I just want to let you know I'm joining from 2 devices, just so you're aware.
Thank you.
All right, good. Well, welcome everyone, both those participating on the Zoom, but anyone who might be watching on line. We appreciate your interest and attendance via the internet. So welcome everyone. We want to start this morning because there's a new guy chairing the committee. We start with some self-introductions. Normally you go around the room, but we don't have a room because we're on Zoom. So I will turn that over to Melissa after I introduce myself. I'm Don Heineman. I'm a farmer rancher from Western Kansas. So your first question is probably, why do you have an interest in early childhood? Well, it's because of my wife Betsy's 40-year career in education, essentially all of it in early childhood. She went from being a first grade teacher to a early reading specialist to owning and operating her own private preschool to finally being a parents' teachers educator, coordinator, and eventually trainer. So through her career, I developed a passion for early childhood. And when I was presented with this opportunity, I couldn't find any way to say no. This is an area that I'm passionate about, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to serve with the rest of you.
Thank you, Don. This is Melissa Rooker. And I know you all know me, but I just want to welcome you, Don. I was particularly delighted to have representation from the western half of the state. I think the rural perspective that you can bring to conversations is also very important. And I know your experience working with the CIF budget gives you working knowledge of the work we do from that perspective of things. So I wanted to welcome you today. I will just go down the list in the order that I see you and just invite brief introductions. So Lieta, would you mind kicking things off?
Welcome. We're glad to have you. And Melissa, are you wanting us to introduce ourselves? Is
I
that
think
it?
that would be great. Yes.
Well, Dawn and I have bumped into each other several times and champions for Kansas kids, essentially. And Dawn, welcome. We're thrilled to have you and your expertise. And I'm glad that you can also rely on your wife's expertise because our partners make us better, don't they? And so it's my third term on the Kansas Children's Cabinet, 3 different governors, and I'm just honored to be able to continue this journey with you as chair. Welcome. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Monica, would you mind going next?
Sure. Hi, Dawn. Good to be with you again. Dawn and I had a past life together over in downtown Topeka, and really, really pleased that you've been put in this leadership role for lots of reasons, but welcome. As you know, I live over on the exact opposite side of the state as you. I'm about 5 miles from Missouri, and I live in Pittsburgh. I have had, I didn't think I was going to start out this way, but since 1995, have been involved in early childhood efforts, both at the local, regional, and now at the state level. And this group is, I have to say, one of my favorite groups because we have such an opportunity to make just a huge impact on the landscape of Kansas as it relates to 0 to 5. I'm a trained teacher and school administrator, licensed with KSDE by real life, and work a lot with 0 to 5 programs and also school districts. So I think you probably all knew that, but for a refresher, as you're seeing all new faces again. So welcome.
Thank you, Monica. Senator Erickson, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, Dawn. Dawn and I had the pleasure of serving together in the Kansas House, and we weren't quite seat mates. I think there was one person in between us on the floor, but so good to serve with you again. And a little bit about my background. I am an educator. I have done it all from birth to 3 as a parent educator with parents as teachers, and I've taught at the college level when I was working on my doctorate. So have a passion for education. I love being on the Children's Cabinet and what we're doing, and just look forward to helping and serving any way I can with you. So welcome.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Senator.
Deanne, would you go next?
Absolutely. Good morning. My name is Deanne Graham. I'm based in Wichita, Kansas. I'm an entrepreneur and have served both in the federal government and in state government. I'm originally from Mississippi, but I've lived in Kansas for over a decade now. I'm a mom of 2 young children, which is why I'm on 2 devices this morning. I'm going to help my new 6th grader learn his locker combination this morning while I'm double tapping here. But I'm just thrilled to be part of the cabinet and get to work with you. Just one additional note, I also assist Melissa with the Dolly Parton Imagination Library as the cabinet's representative there. And it's just, we're so excited about Dolly coming to Kansas soon and just look forward to working with all of you. And I'm in my 2nd term on the cabinet as well.
Thank you, Deanne. And Delise.
Hi, I'm Delise Hofen, and I am originally from Western Kansas. I grew up in Oakley and then lived in Hayes, and now I live in Olathe. My background in education is in education. I was a teacher, and then I was a principal, and then I was a director of HR. And I'm very excited to meet you and look forward to working with you on the cabinet.
Thank you. That is all the voting members of the board. I see you'll get to meet the agency representatives later on in the meeting, Dawn. So I think we'll go ahead and let you proceed with agenda items.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Next item up on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes, and we have 2 sets of minutes to approve. So first would be the minutes from the meeting on June 2nd. I assume that you have all had an opportunity to review and be ready to form an opinion on them. So I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. This is Lietta.
This is Deanne. I'll second.
All right, thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the minutes from the meeting of June 2nd. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Seeing none, the motion carried. Next would be the minutes from the June 23rd meeting. Again, you have had them mailed out to you, so I would entertain a motion to accept.
This is Delise, so moved.
Monica, second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded to approve the minutes from the June 23rd meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. All right, motion carried. Next agenda item will be a report from Amy Meek on the Child Abuse Prevention Grant renewal.
Good morning, Amy Meek, Director of Early Childhood here at the Cabinet. And I wanted to, before I get into the award part, I wanted to introduce our new program coordinator who's working directly with our community-based child abuse prevention grantees and our early childhood block grants. And she also works with some other initiatives and some prevention work for us. And so she's fairly new, and so I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Christy Wyckoff. I started with the Cabinet on May 1st of this year, so just over 3 months. And I'm learning a lot. But yes, as Amy said, I'll be overseeing the CB-CAP and ECBG grants. And I'm excited to be here and learn from everybody and support where I can. So thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, Christy's got to jump right in with some new awards for ECBG and these CB-CAP grantees, but it's been a great way to introduce her to those programs. For our grants, we went ahead and did a renewal for these grantees. This is I think, their third year with an award. And then we plan to do an open competition next year, but our federal award starts on October 1st. And so we usually do not find out. I actually looked up the last 7 years. We usually find out mid-September what that award amount will be. So we are bringing these to you because we will not, we should receive that award prior to our next meeting. Our grantees went ahead and did a renewal application in our Kansas Common App portal and submitted a flat funded budget to us, but also was an opportunity for them to let us know about any staff changes or programmatic changes that they were wanting approval on. So we are, like I said, waiting on that award, and we expect it to be close to our award amount from last year, or maybe just a little bit more, but figured that it was safer to go with flat funding until we know what that award amount is. On the next slide, we'll have the slate and of grantees and their award amount, which again is the same as federal fiscal year 23 for them. We have 6 community-based grantees. And then we do have one statewide. Our Kansas Children's Service League acts as our statewide grantee, and that's part of our requirement for this funding, federal funding, that we do some statewide initiatives for child abuse prevention. So our proposal is to initially plan on doing a flat funding for these grantees, and then we'll just kind of have to see. Our reward comes so close to when we need to get their paperwork in place, and so that they can continue on with their work starting October 1st. In the past, it's been helpful if you all approve us to just, when we get the award, to have a little discretion to determine if we're able to add a little bit more. These grantees have been flat funded. We know costs go up and staffing and all of that. And we've also started really moving towards our programs, including someone with lived experience into their planning of their program, into decision-making and all of that. And that's something that we feel strongly that those people should be compensated for. So that would be another great use of if we had extra funds to be able to increase these awards a little bit for these grantees. In the case, I guess, if it goes the opposite way and we get a less money, then we would probably need to reduce the awards by 1% across the board to be in line with the funding. So I will turn it over for any questions, or let Melissa jump in if I've forgotten something about those.
No, Amy, you did great. We adopted the fast track process that we used last year with ECBG just to help move this along so that we're ready. I think the expectation is we will receive flat funding from Congress. So that's the thinking behind leaving it as is, and opening it up for any questions or discussion from the cabinet.
Okay, cabinet, any questions for Amy? Well, if not, I have one, and just clarification. So your expectation is that funding will be flat, but if it is adjusted either upward or downward, your intention would be to make that adjustment on a pro rata basis or a proportional basis. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
And I will also add that when we get the award, we do have, from when we get it, we do have 2 years to spend it, which really helps just with a little bit of flexibility, but it works a lot better if we can award it all out instead of having to keep track of 2 overlapping awards. So just let you know, when you saw on there that we had a little bit of extra funding last year, but we also have some contracts. We have some our DAISY data collection that we pay for, and also some support from KU of these grants. So we have a few other costs that kind of come out of the CB cap also.
All right. Okay. We do need to vote to approve renewal funding for CB cap. So I would entertain a motion.
Would you like a motion to include flexibility?
That would be really helpful.
I'll try to put one together if that's all right. I move to approve CB cap funding with the flexibility to adapt based on any overages or under funding amounts that come in as presented. This is Leetta.
All right, thank you, Leetta. Do I hear a second?
This is Delise. I'll second.
All right, thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to renew funding for CB cap. I'll get these acronyms eventually. With adjustment to funding on a proportional basis if there is any change in the final number. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Moving
Don,
on.
I do want to call attention. I hate to interrupt, but Dr. Tyler Smith has joined us. Dr. Smith, we allowed everyone to do introductions from the cabinet board since Don is chairing his first meeting with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Dr. Tyler Smith. I'm a general academic pediatrician and fellowship program director at Children's Mercy, Kansas City. And I also serve as the Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Medicine. Very nice to meet you, and also glad to be here this morning.
Good to meet you, Tyler. Thanks for joining us. Okay, now we'll move ahead to item 4, early childhood block grant evaluation. Dr. Lynn Schrefferman from WSU. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you. Good morning. I appreciate the time to present on another year of the early childhood block grants outcomes, and I appreciate the opportunity to continue to do this work. It has been another great year, learn more every year, and continue to try and support the grantees as well as the cabinet I want to thank all of the grantees for their hard work in collecting the data. I would like to also thank the children and families of Kansas who have contributed to this data. And feel free to interrupt me at any time because this is a lot of information. So first, we're just going to do a brief overview of the numbers. There are 19 grantees throughout the state. This year, we served 7,062 children, which is more than an extra 300 and something children this year. 61 counties were served. 66% of these families qualified for free and reduced price lunch. 49% of the children had either a risk factor for a developmental delay or an established developmental delay. And 91% with at least one risk factor. So when we look at the outcomes, we saw an 18% increase in the observed positive parenting, and we'll dive into these a little more when I get to that. We saw a 3% decrease in parental stress. We saw an 18% increase in full-time care in the last 2 years, which is really big. 77% high-quality classrooms, which is the highest we've reached. And 80% on track in early communication. That's the 0 to 3-year-olds. 75% of the 3-year-olds. So then that 3 to 4-year-old year, we're on track in early literacy, and 74% were on track for the 4-year-olds in language comprehension. And then we had 73% on track in numeracy. This slide gives you an overview of all the different services that are being provided to these children and families. So we provide services to caregivers such as home visits, case management, and parent education, as well as mental and behavioral health services. They also provide prenatal services, which include depression screening and home visits. For the 0 to 3 population, there are Part C services that are funded. There's 0 to 3 care and education, home visits, social emotional consultation, and early learning infrastructure, which supports those classrooms, and home providers. Then we have the 3 to 5-year-olds, which we have pre-K infrastructure, which again supports those services, literacy activities, home visits, and social emotional consultation. So a lot of different services provided to these children and families. The risk factors for the block grant are set out in the request for proposal, and this whole report will present the past year's data, so the 22 to 23 year grant year, but I'll be presenting the historical data since 2018, so you have some comparisons. The risk factors were family income that qualifies them for free and reduced price lunch, children and families whose primary language is not English, children at risk for developmental delays. We use the ASQ3 and the ASQ SE2, which is the ages and stages questionnaires, and also children who have established delays, so children who are in Part B or Part C services. Migrant families, children that do not have health insurance, which we see quite a bit of variety across the state on that one. Children in foster care, custody of a relative, or out-of-home placement, or DCF. Caregivers with less than a high school education, teen parents, families that do not have stable housing, and custodial parents who are not married. Here you can see a statewide map of the counties served, and then there's pins for each one of the grantees. So the 19 grantees are represented here and the counties that are currently being served. Now we're going to dig a little bit deeper on the children that were served. 7% of the children served were in foster care or out-of-home placement. 4% did not have health insurance. 23% whose first language was not English, and 49% were at risk or had an established developmental delay. These are very, very consistent with last year. In fact, so close that I double and triple checked the data because I wanted to make sure. Then we have the families. First, we have caregiver education, and there were 6,143 families, and 11% of them had the risk factor of having less than a high school education. A little more information on the families. We had 48% of our families that the primary caregiver was unmarried, 7% teen parents, 1% migrant families, 5% without stable housing, 66% that qualified for free and reduced cost lunch, 27% whose English was their second language, and 54% of them earned less than $40,000 annually.
Can I ask a quick question? This is Senator Erickson.
Sure.
Are those statistics, how many are overlap? For example, how many are I'm guessing unmarried teens whose English is their second language? I mean, do you have those numbers where you've got multiple risk factors?
I would be happy to send you information on how many families have one, how many families have 2, 3, 4, 5, and more.
That would be very interesting.
I'll go back one second because I know it's on the slide. That one. 42% of them had 3 or more risk factors, so it is a high risk population. And I will send you that information.
Lynn, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Lynn, this is Melissa. I would love a report that we could post on the website with the meeting materials once you prepare the response for Senator Erickson, if you don't mind.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that.
That'd be great.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the process that we went through to determine what measures to use to measure these outcomes. We worked quite hard on creating a design that would really capture these short-term, because it's just 1 year, outcomes that are predictive of the long-term goals. So the first thing that we did was we reviewed all of the proposals that the grantees had made to the cabinet for their work. And then we went to visit all of them and discuss their programs and their desired outcomes. We looked at their logic models, and we looked at if they were collecting any measures, and if so, what measures were collecting at the time, because we wanted to make it as easy a transition as possible. Then our next step was to develop a common language, because there are preschool programs all over the state, for example, that were called all kinds of different things. And in order to apply some kind of common metric, we needed to group them together based on similarities, similar goals, similar programming. So we developed a common language and categorized similar programs that had similar goals. Next, we looked at how we could measure those program goals. So the program goals were divided by program type, and the measures were something that we could see change in a 1 year short-term period. I know some people don't think 1 year is short, but when you're looking at child development, year is a short period of time. Based on the goals of the grantees, we reviewed measures that were able to assess those desired outcomes. Then we had a criterion for the measures, and the goal was really to move the grantees from counting outputs to outcomes. So then we wanted measurements of change of the program, of the design, of their desired impact. And we required that those measures be reliable tools. A reliable tool is something that yields consistent information year after year, regardless of who administers it, when or where they administer it. So for example, a measure of height, if you're using a measuring tape to measure height, you want it to consistently give you the same height. Then we also wanted validity. And validity is really about, does the measure what it's intended to? So for example, if we use that tape measure that we were measuring height and tried to measure weight, we would not get consistent results. Another example is if you used a math assessment to try and measure motor skills. So we're really looking at how that measure compares with other measures of that same category, whether those questions go together statistically. So we really want something that's measuring our desired outcome. And then the final criterion is the sensitivity to change. And this is not something you hear a lot about. Most people hear about reliability and validity, but we would be setting the grantees up to fail if we used a measure that is not sensitive to change, because then we wouldn't see any change in the outcomes. So we want to see actual change in the construct, and we require our measures to have that ability to be that sensitive. It requires measures that are very specific, not very global and abstract, and that they typically need to have a very specific time frame. We also want to avoid reactivity, so social desirability or a justification bias can be problematic, and especially for a measure that doesn't have a specified time frame. So we're really looking for a measurement of these dynamic learning constructs.
Lynn, this is Melissa. Can you speak to the timeline for the development of all of this at some point before we move on to the results?
Sure. We were awarded the contract. We spent a month and a couple days visiting all of the we spent a month reading the proposals and looking at where they were serving. Then we spent a month visiting all the grantees. Then we spent another couple months coming up with measures that were consistent. So reviewing all the measures that were available in a specific area. And then we came up with a slate of measures. So that's actually my next slide.
Well, I meant, like, when did you do this work?
Oh, 10 years ago.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yes, 10 years ago we started. I got the call in the middle of August.
Thank you.
So, so we, in late October, had a list of measures and alternative measures that we had narrowed down. And we narrowed that down by what grantees were using, as well as other early childhood programs in the state. And we were also looking at which measures took the least amount of time, because we don't want to take anyone away from providing services for any longer than we possibly have to, and which were least expensive. But we also wanted measures that were really good at informing the programs on the progress that they're prioritizing and providing data for that continuous quality improvement. The measures that we had selected were endorsed and assigned by program type. And the intensity of the measure is also designed to match that cost and intensity of the program. So then it was time to implement the measures. So we started in August. By January, we started the pilot phase. So the grantees got a list with, they get a spreadsheet that has their measure, their program, and how we classified that as a type. And then it has how many they're serving. And that first year during the pilot phase, they were requested to collect measures on 50% of their children and families so that they could get eased into this situation. We also provided a whole bunch of training during that period of time as we continue to on the measures that require training. And we do ongoing analysis of the evaluation measures to continue to make sure that they are showing evidence of the outcomes that we are looking at. Okay, if nobody has any questions, I will move on. The first category that we're going to look at is healthy development. This is one of our blueprint areas. And these are the counties. You can see this is the same as the ECBG map, because all of our grantees use the ages and stages questionnaires to screen for developmental delays. And so all of them are addressing healthy development in that way. So early and frequent screening is so important at this age because children change so quickly. It's really easy for a delay to be missed if we aren't screening regularly. And that regular screening allows us to do early intervention with children if there are any delays, And that results in better outcomes and lower costs. So these screenings programs are using them to help educate parents on developmental stages, to really help parents understand where their child is and what the expectations are for that stage of development. It also is a way of addressing concerns by either teachers or parents, and it allows them to provide activities and interactions that will encourage the development of skills, and it allows for referrals when needed. So here's the ASQ data. I do want to remind you that this is not an outcome because the ASQ is not designed to be an outcome measure. This is really just a screening, but it's vital that we screen children for developmental changes and make sure that they are on track. So you can see the ASQ3 has the 5 different areas, and we're doing very well as far as children's development. And actually, we had increases in the number of children, percentage of children that are meeting benchmarks across all 5 domains. We continue to have fine motor be the highest risk area, but we did see progress in that area this year. There is some speculation that all these touchscreen devices is the reason that we're seeing this. And then we had the social emotional measure, and we are similar to the way we were last year. I did a deep dive on the social emotional in the past, and we tend to be comparable or lower risk than many states. So now we're going to look at the measure of outcome for healthy development, which is the DECA. This is an observational measure that looks at strengths associated with risk, resilience, and protective factors. So this social emotional measure looks at how children do with getting along with their peers, following directions, regulating emotions, things that are really vital for children as they move into classrooms and prepare for school. The DECA is a strength-based measure and looks at attachment and relationships, self-regulation, and initiative. And these skills are really predictive of success in school and are a really very strong foundation for that success. So here's our outcome data. We saw a 6% increase in these strengths across the year after intervention, and you can see the number of children that were assessed each year. And you can see we're doing quite well in this area, with 86% of the children being on track by the end of the year. And it compares nicely to the historic data. The next blueprint area we're going to talk about is strong families. The Strong Families programs include home visits, parent education, case management, and mental and behavioral health services. One of the great things about these programs is they are provided at a variety of different intensities so that they can meet the needs of their families and their communities. They also are programs that tend to have strong impacts on trauma and toxic stress. And they also positively impact the early childhood communication, social skills, and brain development. This is an overview of the programs and how many families were served in the past year by each one of the programs. So you can see parent education is the largest, with home visiting being quite close. And these are the counties where our grantees have decided that these are services that are needed, and they're providing those. Another strong family outcome is the parental stress. So one of the things we do is look at the parental stress index. Parenting stress impacts children's social, emotional, and cognitive and language development. Parents and children and their interactions impact each other, and it's important that they develop these healthy relationships. Parenting stress has been found to impact the quality of their caregiving and their parenting, their parent-child interactions, as well as their child's behavior. The Parenting Stress Index focuses on 4 key areas: parental distress, parent-child dysfunctional interaction, difficult child, so that's the perception of the parent about how difficult their child is, and overall stress. This is a representation of the families from time 1 to time 2. We had a 3% decrease in average stress. I've also included some research in here just so you have comparison. Parent education programs in 4 research studies actually saw a 10% decrease, but these are much more intense programs that are more long-term. And then the home visiting, there were 4 studies and we saw a 4% decrease, but their families also started considerably lower in the stress than ours did. Next, we have the positive parenting outcomes, and the KIPS, the keys to interactive parenting, is the measure we use. This is a strength-based assessment of positive parenting and parent-child interactions. It provides observations of that responsive caregiving. Parent encouragement and the ability to set limits is really important at this stage of development. And as those are measured by the KIPS, that's a really great way to see if they're promoting that social, emotional, and cognitive development. The KIPS is an observational measure, as I said, so it observes parents and children playing, so it's a naturalistic observation. It looks at the sensitivity of the parent, their ability to provide support, their involvement with their child, how adaptable they are, their engagement, their ability to set limits, their encouragement, and their ability to promote exploration for their child. And here we have the improvement that we saw in each of these subcategories. So building relationships, we saw an increase. So actually, we saw an increase in each area. The largest increase was in promoting learning. So you can see from time 1 to time 2 that they are growing and changing in each of these sub areas. And we had an 18% increase in positive parenting. So the parents that are meeting that benchmark of positive parenting, we had 18% more families providing that after the intervention. This is a sizable increase in positive parenting, as you can see as you look at the historical data. Next, I'm going to move to early learning, the final blueprint category. And these are the programs that are provided in early learning. So we have pre-K and early learning for children with special needs. That's the smallest because much of those funds come from elsewhere. 0 to 3 care and education, social emotional classroom and family consultation. So if a child is struggling in a classroom, they provide consultation, and pre-K. And you can see pre-K is by far the largest. And these are the counties that these services are provided in based on each grantee's assessment of the needs of the counties that they're serving. This is the distribution of the number of hours that children are in these early learning environments. We had a 4% increase in full-time care from last year, and in the last 2 years, we've had an 18% increase in full-time care. This is very important for families who are trying to struggle. They struggle to find part-time care, to find transportation for their child from one location to another. So this is a strong indicator. So the first measure I'm going to talk about is the class. This looks at classroom quality, and it really focuses on those interactions between the adults in the classroom and the students. It's an observation that looks at high quality, responsive interactions and relationships. And is very predictive of positive academic outcomes as well as social skills outcomes. Children who are in these high quality relationships from infancy through pre-K have higher cognitive, language, and pre-academic and social skills when they enter school. And it's really, this quality is defined by positive, responsive, serve and return relationships with the adults. The Center on the Developing Child at Harvard really talks a whole lot about serve and return relationships. Those of you who have been on the cabinet for a while saw a video a few years ago of serve and return relationships. So it's really about, if the child makes a bid for attention, so child coos at the parent, then the parent responds so that it goes back and forth. It's kind of like a little tennis game where there's a back and forth. And that's really vital for child development. We have 3 different measures of the class because there is so much change during the 0 to 5 age range that they have to have different measures for all 3, just because they need to look at the developmentally appropriate context for each child and that growth and development. So we have an infant measure that looks at responsive caregiving. You can see the benchmark there is 4.25, and on average, our classrooms are hitting a 5.2. The range is 0 to 7. So you can see these are nice, high quality classrooms. I'm very excited to see our infant classroom quality going up. For toddlers, we have emotional and behavioral support and engaged support for learning. And you can see the benchmarks are 5 and 3, and we're well above on average those benchmarks. And then for pre-K, we have emotional support, classroom organization, and instructional support. And you can see those benchmarks are 5, 5, and 3, and that we are well above the average, or for average is well above the benchmark. You'll notice that the benchmark for instructional support and engaged support for learning is lower. The reason for that is because high levels of sustained educational content would not be developmentally appropriate at this age. It's best to do these in short spurts and then do different activities where children are not expected to really focus on academic measures. And here you see the increase from fall to spring in the classrooms that are high quality. So we went from 67% of the classrooms that are high quality to 77%, which is a 10% increase. And you can see overall with the historical data, our high quality classrooms are looking good, and we're improving as time goes by. The services grantees are providing coaching in these classrooms to help them improve. Next, we're going to look at 0 to 3 early communication. We use the IGDs early communication indicator, which is developmentally sensitive, very brief, and play-based. So it's not asking the child to do anything they don't normally do. They play with an adult. This measure was developed at Juniper Gardens, so I like that we're using a Kansas product. And early communication is very, very important because it is predictive of future success, school readiness, and it also allows for early identification and intervention. The nice thing, because 0 to 3, there's so much development that happens in communication across that period, is that IGDs looks at 4 different areas so that it can follow that development. So it records gestures, vocalizations, single words, and multiple words so that it can span that 0 to 3 age range. And here are our outcomes. We look great this year on this. We had a 24% increase in communication, and we are up to 80% of the students that are on track. You'll see we had a period of time where we did not get 3 measures during the year, which is nice to get because then we can look at trends. Next, we have the 3-year-old literacy. 3-year-old literacy is very important because oral language at this age predicts literacy and reading outcomes. And phonemic awareness abilities are starting to develop around 2.5 and into the 3s. So it's important for us to look at those. And I will tell you, in past years, when we analyzed the data and looked at whether children had an assessment during their 3-year-old pre-K year, those children were significantly more likely to be on reaching the benchmarks during their 4-year-old pre-K year. The age 3 IGDs is a newer measure. This is the first time I presented on it. And we are very fortunate because the University of Minnesota, who has been developing this measure, they received an IES grant long ago to develop the MyIGDs when Juniper Gardens got the grant for the IGDs, because the goal was that there would be a developmental continuum of measures. And since then, they've worked on an age 3 version, and they have allowed us to use it. I've got some samples here just so that you have an understanding of what it is. The first one is letter knowledge, and they use fridge letters, and I just love this. And from what I hear, the children love it as well, because it's something they're familiar with, because most children have magnetic letters and have experienced that. So the assessor would say, for example, move the F to the refrigerator. This is done on iPad. The teacher has an iPad and the child has an iPad, which is great because then the teacher can control the whole assessment. The child would drag the F over to the refrigerator. The next measure is sound matching. So the assessor would say a word such as apple, and then one robot would say apple, and the other would say bear. And then the child is asked to pick which robot said the same word as the assessor. I have 2 samples here of mixed oral language because I wanted you to understand that there's a whole span. And one of the beautiful things about using the iPad is that it can use the capacity of the computer to deliver an item for a child. So if a child's doing really well, they'll get more difficult items, where if they're struggling, they'll get less difficult, so that we can really hone in on where they are in that development. So the first one on the left, the assessor would say, what is this a picture of? This is picture naming, and the child would say caterpillar, and then they mark it if the child is correct. This is one of the easier items. On the more difficult end of the spectrum, you can see on the right for mixed oral language. And what the assessor would do is say, point to the cat on the bench. And so if the child touches the cat on the bench, they get that correct. So you can see that there is a broad range of difficulty here. And because this is a new measure and it's been in development, we only have 1 year, because past years they had been doing some changing of the measure, so we can't really compare them. But 75% of our students were on track, and that's a 15% increase in early literacy. Next, I'm going to move on to 4-year-old early literacy. And one component of that is language comprehension. Language comprehension is predictive of literacy and reading outcomes. It really looks at the ability to derive meaning and draw inferences from written and spoken language. Children with larger vocabularies at school entry are better at acquiring new words and their language comprehension. So this is the MyIGDs. It can get really confusing with the IGDs, the age 3 IGDs, and the MyIGDs. The language comprehension tests are picture naming. So again, the assessor would say, what is this a picture of? The student would say a bear, and they would get that correct. The other subtest is what's called which one doesn't belong. So the assessor would point and say, bus, butterfly, car, which one doesn't belong? And one of the things that I find most fascinating about this is nationally, the developers of these measures have told me that which one doesn't belong is the most difficult subtest, but not in Kansas. This is always our strongest area for the last 10 years. Every year, which one doesn't belong is always the strongest. I don't know what accounts for that, but it continues and we haven't seen any change. They still are very strong at this. I sometimes joke that it's because they're common sense Kansans. So here's our language comprehension skills. We had a 22% increase this year. You can see that we're doing pretty consistently good work that is similar to past years. The other component of the MyADs is phonological awareness, and this is really important. It's the ability to manipulate, detect, identify initial sounds in spoken language, and it's key to learning how to read. Strong phonological awareness in pre-K predicts third grade reading proficiency, so this is something that we really care about. It's vital for these teacher-child interactions to be small group and to support these emerging skills with frequent opportunities to practice. But also the great thing is that the research is showing it really only needs to be like 10 to 15 minutes a day. So it's not like teachers are having to spend long periods of time doing this. It's just that repetition through the pre-K. So at the bottom, you have examples of the 3 subtests that load on this. And the first one is rhyming. So the assessor would say, bees, cheese, cat. And then she would ask the student to say which 2 rhyme, and the child would select which 2 rhyme. For alliteration, the assessor would say bear, cat. Find the one that starts with B, and then the child would point. And then finally, for sound identification, which tends to be the most difficult subtest, they are asked to find the letter that starts with the sound that they say, and then the assessor says Z. This is one area where classrooms really struggled during COVID because you cannot teach phonological awareness without some preparation. It takes focus, and teachers had lots of other stressors. So I'm happy to see us making progress in this area. Again, we had a 6% increase this year in phonological awareness. So you can see we're getting back to where we were pre-COVID. Now this slide is new. I wanted to help you understand this is overall literacy, so it's all the subtests combined. And what I really wanted to show you is how much progress children are making. So even though they may not be in that area where it's considered on track in all those subtests, they are making progress. And as you can see, there's more children that are in the green, but also more children that have moved up and are close to being on track in early literacy. Finally, for early learning, we have 3- and 4-year-old numeracy. And numeracy is important because longitudinal studies show that preschool numeracy skills are associated with future academic success. The MyIGD's numeracy focuses on 4 different areas: oral counting, number naming, quantity comparison, and one-to-one correspondence counting. So the oral counting is just counting and then naming numbers. Quantity comparison, they're shown 2 blocks with dots in them, and they are asked which block has more circles. The child points to the one that has more circles. And then on one-to-one correspondence counting, they're asked to point to the dot and count. So that is a correspondence between the numbers that they're saying and the actual dots. And here you can see our scores. We typically do pretty well in numeracy. And I want to remind you that these are a higher risk than in the general population. So all of these children have experienced more risk in their lives. We had a 16% increase in early numeracy. So we're starting to catch back up. And then I have the same plot for you for the 4-year-olds. Numeracy is a little harder to plot this way because the benchmarks are monthly rather than seasonal. So with the early literacy, they have a fall, a winter, and a spring because they're trying to prepare the child for school, and they don't depend on the child's age in months, where numeracy is still going with a month by month. But you can see that there's quite a bit of progress in children developing these numeracy skills and fewer children at risk. So in conclusion, there were an increase in the number of children and families served, and 91% of those families and children had at least one risk factor. 54% of them earned less than $40,000 a year. 49% of them, so almost half, were either at risk or had developmental delays. A 6% increase in the children that were on track in the DECA, which is the social skills development measure. As far as strong families, parents increased in their positive parenting and decreased in their parental stress. And finally, early learning. 55% of the children served in pre-K or 0 to 3 care and education were receiving full-time care. And that is, as I've said, an 18%. So that's a big jump, biggest jump we've seen over the last 2 years. Classroom quality was the highest we've seen. It was 77% of classrooms observed to be high quality. 80% of the 0 to 3-year-olds were on track in early communication. 75% of 3-year-olds in pre-K were on track in early literacy. So these 3-year-olds are getting a good start. 74% were on track in language comprehension. 44% were on track in that key skill of phonological awareness. Although this is lower than we'd like, it represents a return to pre-COVID levels. So I'm hoping to continue to see increases. We did bring in a internationally known researcher and speaker who does lots of interventions in Florida on phonological awareness to work with grantees and help them to think about how they present this material and the best approach for these materials last spring. 73% of the 3 and 4-year-olds were on track in numeracy. But as I showed in the plots, many of the children who were still at risk were very close to the cutoff of not being at risk. So that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Lynn, for that report. And I've got to say, as someone who's experiencing this information for the very first time, it's very, very impressive. The ingenuity and the extensive nature of the measuring tools that you employ, and also the progress that you see in the target population is quite impressive. Very good work, and I appreciate your report. Thank you.
Thank you. And if anybody has questions, I know it's a lot of information, so feel free to let me know.
Hello, this is Dr. Smith. May I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Yes, so thank you so much for your presentation. One question that I have is, as you're doing the developmental screenings for children, is this for children who don't already have a diagnosed developmental delay or a medical condition that causes or has developmental delays included?
Correct.
Okay, thank
They're
you.
exempt from that screening if they already have an established delay.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Monica.
Go ahead, Monica.
Thank you. I'll say it every year. I'm going to say it again. There is no other funding source in the state of Kansas that has this level of accountability, this level of detail, and this level of thoughtfulness from both the local level and the state level. If anybody ever questions how these funds are spent, boy, howdy, can we show them? Lynn, the amount of work that it takes to put all that information that you have gathered into a way that we can digest it is an incredible skill. And thank you for continuing to do it.
Thank you. I don't know for certain, but many of the people that we work with nationally tell me that Kansas is the first state in the nation to do this kind of comprehensive statewide measurement of outcomes, which just makes me so happy.
Mr. Chair, it's Senator Erickson.
Yes, Renee, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that there are 2 grantees in Sedgwick County. Can you share with me who those grantees are?
Sure. It's United Way of the Plains. They have a consortium that works with several different providers in the Wichita area and the top education centers.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hi, this is Delise, and this is fabulous. The gain that we've made this year, it's astounding. That much gain has come through. The scores are so much higher. I'm wondering if you have some key points that you can point to and say, hey, this is something that really contributed to us being able to increase the scores in those areas. Is there something that we're doing differently that we weren't doing before? I know that part of it is because we're back in and kids are back in and it's not COVID stuff anymore, but I'm wondering if there's some other things that we're doing that might have attributed to that, because it absolutely is flabbergasting how great those scores are.
I would say that the grantees are the experts in providing this, and that the beauty of this is that this is really a Kansas story where grantees are allowed to do what their community needs and use their expertise to address the needs of their community, and that we just provide the data. I can't take any credit for any of this. I just try and show them how they're doing.
Well, I think one of the things that you talked about is like the phonemic awareness resources that you're offering out to them to be able to get some information about how we can do that differently. And so I think that's really encouraging that we're doing some things like that to be able to get some best practices out to these educators. So I think it's fabulous. So thank you. That was a really amazing report, very well put together and really easy to understand. So thank you.
And this is Melissa with just to follow on. Lynn, I wonder if what we're seeing is cumulative effect of now being 10 years in. As much turnover as we know there is with staffing, you do have people who have been engaged and becoming more proficient in the use of these measures, the coaching that you and your team provide. Do you think that, and we had the detour of the pandemic and we got knocked off course. Do you feel like it's safe to assume that we're starting to see cumulative effect of this approach, or is this just a really good year?
No, I think there is a cumulative effect, and we work really hard to help them understand their data. So we do data coaching throughout the year, and we're really trying to help them so that they can say, okay, so for example, we had a program that was doing the KIPS in the home, and it was really a literacy focused program. But when I presented, they get even more in depth than what you do, because you guys would be here for way too long if I went into that much depth. But they were seeing that their home visiting program was not having an impact on limit setting in parents. And the grantee looked at that and said, well, we can add that component in. That's an essential component for when they go to school. And so we just really try and give them the information so that I do think there's a cumulative effect of learning how to use this information and how to address the needs of their families.
Well, I certainly think we see that in the fact that on so many of those measures, there's a trend towards greater progress year after year. And every year is a different target child population. So the fact that you see that trend statewide and among all the grantees tells me that they're getting better at doing what they do. And part of that is effective measurement and feedback on what they are achieving. So it's really encouraging to me.
And I'd also add to that, Dawn, that in addition to the children changing, the folks doing the work are changing, and especially in the childcare setting. And so the fact that those numbers stay consistent is a testimony to the infrastructure that local folks have put in play. supported by the dollars that we provide. So it's almost like double grade.
All right, any further questions or feedback? If not, thank you, Lynn, for a very good report. Appreciate you being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 5 on the agenda, Lucas Neese will give us an update on the Child Care Capacity Accelerator. I know that the board took action on this item at the late June meeting, but Lucas is here to give us an update.
Thank you. So just, an overview that at the June 23rd meeting, the decision was made to award 52 projects using a total of $43 million that was from 4 sources. We had CCDF, ARPA, $20 million, Spark Recovery Office, $20 million, PDG, about $1 million, and then support from the Patterson Family Foundation of $2.5 million. So that was a subset. That's what was awarded. I want to remind you that we had 117 million in requests from 105 applicants. 103 million of that was for construction expenses, or was dominated by construction expenses. The applications themselves had both pieces often. We had 7 applications where business and economic development entities were the lead on the proposal, and 11 from school districts. Just as a reminder, we see a real need for construction dollars in addition to funding to recruit and retain workers, and helping communities do what they believe will best meet the needs of their families and employers. And also, this was really a snapshot of shovel-ready projects in spring of 2023. We know from conversations over the last 6 months, lots of projects that were 2 or 3 months out from being able to submit. This was really just those applicants who said, we can submit in May of 2023. We have a project that is ready. So of those 52 grantees, work is starting. We've got about 30 projects that have all of their paperwork in place to really get going. We've got another 18 that are working their way through the system. There's a couple layers of approval on our side after getting all of their paperwork to us. They should be finalized within the next week. We have 4 applicants that have paperwork that still needs to be submitted, and they're well aware of that. I want to thank Megan Broha with the cabinet, and Dioga and Amy for all the work that they've done to get us this far, as well as CPPR. Really exciting. Great Bend had a great groundbreaking 2 weeks ago that Melissa Rooker and the governor were able to attend. And there's just lots of excitement from our grantees to move these projects forward. We are excited to continue to document the accelerator program's progress. There's a lot of work being done by KU to make sure that we are able to evaluate the work that's being done so that we can be learning as we move forward to know anything that has really just lessons learned. But we're going to learn from everybody. There may be some examples of projects where it just works really exceptionally well, and we want to be able to elevate that information and make other similar communities in Kansas aware of approaches that have worked. And as we move forward, we will continue to share updates with this board and share also with on the All In for Kansas Kids website. And that's my presentation. You've got the map in front of you of the 52 projects. We continue to think about how we can help the applicants who weren't awarded in this first round. There were so many exceptional applications where the demand simply outstripped the funding that we had available. So we continue to work on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lucas. Can I assume that as these awards are implemented into actual work on the ground, that you will be bringing future progress reports to us?
Yeah, the project team will absolutely be bringing project reports back to the board.
All right, good. Members of the board, any further questions for Lucas?
Can I just draw attention? This is Melissa. Just, I know it's on screen and everyone can read it, but I just want to emphasize our 43.5 million is matched by $58.8 million in community sourced funding. That is private sector involvement. That is community level involvement. That's support from businesses and nonprofits and a whole range of fundraising effort that has been in place across the state to match the public funding that we're providing with private sector dollars. And I don't want that fact overlooked, because that is a heavy lift to be able to secure that additional funding. We require that as a component of our grant making process, because we really believe in the public-private partnership model, and the reflection that is of support at the community level. So I don't want to leave that out there without really highlighting it.
Yeah, that's very good to point out. So I wasn't involved back in June. So was there some minimum level of community support that you required for a grant to be awarded?
We had a 25% match requirement.
So you can see in those numbers, communities exceeded that by quite a bit, but it's just tremendous. And you know, the support from the Patterson Family Foundation on our side of things to gift us the 2.5 million that they gave us allowed us to stretch just a bit farther and really get as many different projects in place. The 43.5 million is funding $20 million worth of construction and actually some of the Patterson as well, but 21 million of that is startup capital for the major expense of recruiting the staff that's needed to staff these beautiful new buildings that are being built, train people, help bolster the workforce, and equip the program to be successful through their first year. So this is not just construction costs, this is operations as well, because we want people getting a successful start to this exciting new range of childcare programs.
I'd also call attention, I apologize. I realize there are more than 52 dots on this map, and that is because our partners at KU have updated the map to show not only the 52 projects that were awarded, but the locations of components of those projects. And just in case anybody starts counting.
we for example, Reno County, we have a community coalition, so they are spreading the grant award that we awarded to them to support multiple child care providers, different programs in the county. Shawnee County is another example of that. We have several of those examples where we had really, in the spirit of the RFP, we had community coalitions that apply. I think Shawnee County has 9 providers that are benefiting from the grant award.
All right, thank you. Any further input or questions for Lucas or Melissa? If not, thank you, Lucas, for your presentation. We will now move ahead to agenda item 6, a very intriguing presentation from Betsy Waring from the Dane G. Hansen Foundation in Northwest Kansas. Welcome, Betsy.
Good morning. I have my video turned on. It's not working. Do I need, there we go. There we are. I'm happy to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to present to you. And this is very different than the last two presentations, because they're talking about here's money you've invested and all the great stuff that's happening. And what I want to talk about is here's some great stuff that could happen if we make an investment. So it's a little bit of the opposite. I want to start just briefly with, and am I controlling this screen? The slides or not?
Betsy, I am doing that, and I'll try to pay attention. This is Lindsay, but if I'm behind, please just say next slide and I'll catch up for you.
That sounds good. So we're looking at overall an endowment proposal for 26 counties in Northwest Kansas. So I want to start by just telling you a little bit about the Dane G. Hansen Foundation. I don't know how many of you are familiar with our organization, because we are really limited to Northwest Kansas. So if you think Saline County north to Nebraska and west all the way to Colorado, that entire quarter of the state is served by the Dane G. Hansen Foundation. And we grant about $23 million a year out in that area. So it's a significant amount of funding that we put out in the area every year. We serve a very rural part of the state, but a fairly robustly positive part of the state. I think communities are really working hard in that part of the state and addressing the issues that they have with the help of the Hansen Foundation, the Patterson Foundation, other organizations that have really helped change the dynamics. We started talking at the Hansen Foundation about how to address the child care issue probably 7 years ago. We spent about 4 years kind of talking about it, throwing our hands in the air and moving on to other conversations because we just felt like we couldn't get our arms around it. About 3 years ago, we actually said, we've got to do some good work. We had done some research. We created grant programs that provided sustainability for the staffing, so bonus grants, and we sort of patterned this over some of the Smart Start work that happened in the 90s. So if a staff member had stayed for 6 months at the same organization, we gave them a bonus to keep them from jumping ship for 25 cents more an hour at another facility because their wages are so low. So we started with that. We also awarded curriculum grants. We awarded early childhood education book grants to them. And then we moved on to expansion grants and new slot grants. And shortly after that happened, really the onslaught of funding started coming also from the state and other places. So that was good for us because we didn't have to spend as much of our grant money on those expansion grants because funding was coming from other places. So we've kind of been in this game for a while. We have spent more than $3.6 million in the last 3 years on childcare in Northwest Kansas in those grant opportunities that I talked about. Our partner organization, the Northwest Kansas Economic Innovation Center, was created about 9 years ago. It is designed to serve the same 26 county area, but they do economic development work. So we worked with them. They mirrored the grants that we offered, but they were able to support quote unquote for-profit childcare centers, although we know none of them are making much money. They were not designated as 501c. So we were not able to make grants with them, but the Innovation Center was able to work with them. And then about a year ago, the Innovation Center hired a childcare program specialist, and she has really been a game changer. She has her name is Dana Jo Stanton. She is working with all the counties. They're doing some tremendous support work. And I think she was helpful in some of the grants that Lucas was just talking about. And we were really pleased to see several of the communities in Northwest Kansas be recipients of those accelerator grants. It's a game changer. So if you want to switch slides now. So we want to just show briefly that we are mirroring the work that the Children's Cabinet and the state are really saying that they want to do, which is to explore public-private partnership models, as Melissa was just talking about with the accelerator grants. And we were part of that matching funding in some of those grants in Northwest Kansas. So we believe in that kind of partnership, and just like the state as a private funder, we want to leverage our dollars because we recognize we can do better and more work if we do. So also connecting the government with nonprofit leaders, and here we all are at the table together. So, and wage support, I underlined that word because part of our grant program when we launched our new slot program or expansion program was that they had to show that they were going to provide a living wage. We didn't necessarily identify that, but in other words, we weren't going to give a grant to a facility that wanted to open and pay, $8 an hour to people because we knew that, first of all, the facility probably would not survive. And second of all, the individuals working there might really be struggling. So that's something we've been really paying attention to at the Hansen Foundation. Certainly, we're hoping to leverage some resources with this proposal today and create family-friendly workforces in Kansas. So I would tell you that in 2022, in March, there was a survey in Ellis County, which includes Hayes, one of the larger communities in our service area. They have about 22,000 people in Hayes, 21,000. They did a survey and they had, of the people that were currently seeking childcare, 97% said if they had quality childcare that they could afford, they would be in the workforce. And that was 115 people. Well, that's a lot of jobs. 45 of those individuals have bachelor's degrees. So very employable people, couldn't go to work because they didn't have any place to put their kids. So in terms of creating family-friendly workforce, we know that childcare is a critical factor. And then finally, the measure of success in terms of the public-private investment relative to your budget and the state's budget. We're going to talk a little bit about that here this morning. So next slide, please. So I wanted to give you an example of how childcare investment has made a huge difference in a rural community, because I feel like it's a little bit of a different landscape in those areas. So Colby, Kansas has about 5,500 people. In our part of the state, that's a pretty big place, actually. So we worked with the Children's Medical Center in Colby, and they created an on-site childcare center with 35 slots. We granted them $180,000. That certainly didn't cover all of it, but leveraged funding from other sources to create that center. They opened it, they filled the 35 slots, they immediately had a waiting list. We also know that it opened, maybe not, it says 35 slots, maybe not 100% of those slots moved from other places in the community, but most of them did. So it also opened slots for community members who were looking or waiting for a place to put their children. So they also were able to address a really important but difficult to address issue in terms of the time that childcare is available. Most childcare providers are roughly 8 to 6 or 7:30 to 6. And for healthcare, a lot of those workers have shifts that start at 6 or 7 a.m. So they actually created something that met their workforce. So they had an expanded hour, and their surveys show that people were very grateful for that. I think the most important thing on here, a couple of things. One is that this was a childcare center that provided enrichment, and the parents feel like it's not just a place where my kids are warm and safe and fed, but it's a place where they're actually learning and developing their important brains during those 0 to 3, 0 to 5 years. It also created 17 new jobs. And again, childcare is an economic development issue in our communities, and 17 jobs is nothing small in a community of 55 people. But more importantly, 45% of the people that they surveyed that had children in the center said it played a role in their decision to work there. So they were really able to show that by providing childcare, they were able to keep workforce and attract workforce. So we felt like that was just that's just one success story. There's many others we could talk about, but I have a limited time with you this morning. So this is the one I chose to share with you. They have also now increased, because of that success, they've opened 109 slots, and we actually granted them another $230,000 to help make that happen, to continue that success. So in short, what I'm bringing to you today and planting a seed for hopefully discussion and conversation is a regional childcare endowment. That is how the Hansen Foundation works. We grant $23 million a year away based on a 5% payout of the endowed fund that was created 68 years ago by Dane Hansen. So this is a very common approach to funding for philanthropy, not as much for the state. And we understand that that's just different in how state government finance works, but it's a really important and helpful tool. What we want is for it to create sustainable community level childcare solutions in our 26 counties. So again, a quarter of the state we hope would be funded and supported by this. We would like to establish the endowment in the Greater Northwest Kansas Community Foundation, and they are a regional nonprofit community foundation. So they don't have any single community that they are beholden to. They serve the region. They serve countywide community foundations and regional nonprofits such as Developmental Services of Northwest Kansas, organizations like that. So that's their entire role. They are certainly experts at how to read grant proposals and make sure they qualify according to all of the rules. They can, they have a great process for applying for grants and all of that. So that's who we would like to start the endowment with. The distributable funds would be based on 5% of the average fund balance, similar to other endowed programs and how they work. We would like to accept grants on a regular basis. So every month we'd be able to look and see who needed support, who might have an emergency, who's got a gap funding need. They'd be reviewed by the Innovation Center because they have the expert in childcare. They'd be reviewed by Greater Northwest to ensure that all of those applications meet all the requirements. And then we'd have a grant review committee that would actually determine the awards. So next slide. So the eligibility to actually apply for the grants from the endowed fund would be that they'd be located in our service area, licensed with KDHE and up to speed without any issues with their licensing and their ratios, et cetera. They would have to be supporting at least 8 children. We would make some exceptions if they were holding a slot for, a pregnant mom who had a sibling in the program, something along those lines. They have to accept infants. We recognize that's the most difficult to find for families and also the most difficult to fund. They have to employ at least one full-time provider, so most group homes would qualify for that. They have to be open year-round, possible exception if it was specifically a school district funded program and teachers didn't want that support in the summer. They have to accept DCF childcare subsidy, although they could set the tuition rate a little bit higher than that. They would have to be able to allow families to be supplemented with that. And they have to share their financial information as part of the review process for sure. So what we think the impact is that when fully established, the endowment would actually provide a source of revenue to sustain, that's our main issue with this, childcare facilities that would not require raising funds every year, would not require them to come back to the communities for bond issues, for other tax dollars. It would just be a sustainable source. It would be there. It would be growing every year with proper investment and also providing the income that's needed for these childcare centers. The childcare centers would have a better quality of life, the providers, because we would have more appropriate wages, potential for benefits, job security, all of the things that we all want in our jobs. And our employers, we know, would benefit with an increase in available employees. Again, referencing what we learned in the Ellis County study, that there are people out there that want to work and they just can't because they don't have children. We actually know families that are not expanding their family or having more children because they don't have childcare. So it's a very big issue, particularly in rural areas. And that, of course, the most important is that we're creating a better workforce for Kansas. Children are having quality, stable education as early childhood in those critical brain development years, and increased economic opportunities because their families are in better shape economically. So next slide. So our goal is robust. We would like to create a $25 million endowment. We'd love to do it in 5 years. We'll see if that 5-year timeframe is doable. We have committed $5 million, so $1 million a year from our fund every year for the next 5 years to start the endowment. We are also committed to approaching other funders to try and help make this happen. So that's exactly what I'm doing today, is asking the state to be one of the funders in this endowment proposal. We've already talked with the Patterson Foundation. They're currently reconsidering the match at some size to the fund. They'll be talking about that soon. And then I would be happy to go to other organizations. So I would say at the minimum, if the state of Kansas matched, it would be 100% match, because the Hansen Foundation has already committed $5 million. But if we were able to actually get the other funders on board, and I'm an optimistic person at heart, I think that we can make this happen. It could be potentially a 400% match for the state of Kansas, which is pretty significant. So potentially we think that once it's established, and if it were fully funded, it would be used as a model to replicate in other regions of the state, where you could use a similar public-private partnership, and a single investment by the state could provide ongoing support for sustainability of childcare. We know that it's always going to need financial support, just like public school education or private school education. It can't be funded 100% by parents. It just doesn't work. They don't have the capacity. And it's always going to be needed for the growth of our communities to have positive childcare. So we feel like this is an important step to try and provide sustainability. Let's say all the grants at the end of the year, we had money left over, the sustainability grants, then it could be used for other things like enhancement for early childhood in the area as well. So we feel like there's always going to be a need for those funds. That's kind of what I want to share with you today. I want to hopefully have some questions and discussion. It's a bold idea, but we think it's also one that's been proven effective over the course of time.
Dawn, this is Melissa. Before we open to the full cabinet for discussion, I just want to frame this for you all. We're not going to seek a motion. This isn't a meeting to take action on any of the elements of this proposal. This is for food for thought for us as a cabinet board. This was one of the ideas submitted to the accelerator that we couldn't use the sources of funding for the purpose of the match to put into an endowment. So we had to call Betsy and say, we're really sorry, but this is not an application we're going to be able to consider. But we were really intrigued by the potential that this model presents as a pilot or as the roadmap for state level investment in early childhood, either on a regional basis or some other structure. But I wanted to invite Betsy to present to all of you so that we can marinate on the idea and think about what might be an appropriate recommendation that maybe later in the year we can entertain. I will say our Children's Initiative Fund budget does not have budget capacity to be the source of the match. So this is really a conversation around, do we seek restructuring? So some of the pass-through transfers maybe are managed a different way with state general fund dollars replacing it. Is it a straight up recommendation for consideration by the legislature and the governor in the budget process for a one-time general fund investment? I don't know. And I don't know if this cabinet will seek to move forward or not, but we'll let you ask Betsy clarifying questions that help you wrap your arms around the idea, and then we can come back to this at one of the remaining meetings later this year.
Thanks, Melissa.
All right, thank you, Betsy. It was a very intriguing concept that you bring to us. And as Melissa says, we're don't have the capacity or the vehicle really to fund directly from Children's Cabinet, but it's a very intriguing idea that certainly merits discussion and consideration. So board members, we'll open it up to you. Questions, feedback?
I'm sitting in the middle of my home office. This is Lietta. Sorry. So I'm talking fast because they're remodeling and it's very loud, but the presentation was fantastic and right in the wheelhouse of what we're dealing with on economic development issues and all things labor force issue related. So I loved hearing how you're creatively meeting the needs. And I appreciate you coming today to present it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We did not certainly expect an answer at all today. It's a seed planting presentation. And I think if the Children's Cabinet felt like it was a meritable approach, or that we feel like it would be very impactful for you to be supportive of it as we move forward in whatever capacity it might take for the state to consider helping us with this pilot. No questions either means it was, you know, I told you everything you needed to know, or you're just stunned by the whole approach.
Well, I was struck by your comparison with education, both public and private. It's impossible for the parents to totally afford the education of their children. The community, in some way, has to step up and subsidize the education, either public or private. And it certainly appears that that's a valid comparison here. Most parents cannot afford to adequately pay for childcare, and that's why we're in this dilemma. And it really is a roadblock to economic development, among all the other positives that opening up a new proposal like this would bring.
We've seen the endowment model work in so many places, and it feels like this is a place where it needs to happen. We talked about, do we establish endowments in various counties? And then we said, no, we really think we just need a regional approach, so that we're not limited by a county that doesn't ever use their endowment because they're doing well for whatever reason. I don't know that that's ever going to happen, but it just feels like the most flexible tool for us, and it's got good parameters around it to allow it to be used effectively. And we're excited, and we're committed to starting it for sure, and would love to be able to leverage our dollars and create something that we feel like would probably be able to sustain child care centers in our area almost entirely once it was fully funded.
Further questions or feedback for Betsy? All right, seeing none, thank you, Betsy.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
I don't think this is the end of the discussion by any means, so thank you.
Well, you know how to find me. I think everyone in Northwest Kansas has my phone number and my email. So now add yourselves to the list, and feel free to reach out.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move ahead now to item 7, agency updates. Melissa,
yeah, but Amy, why don't you go ahead and begin, and then we can just work our way through the list.
Sure. Amy Meek again, Director of Early Childhood at the Cabinet. And I'm going to kind of jump back to the early childhood block grant topic and piggyback on Dr. Schefferman's presentation. This is probably one of my favorite meetings of the year, the August meeting, because this is just always really exciting to see the hard work and the efforts that have gone into supporting children and families throughout the year. The data that she presented was collected and ended end of May. She's quickly pulls that together in the summer to bring this report. But the next step after this is that we go out and do site visits with the grantees. So Lynn and her team take this report and then break it down for an individual report for each grantee. That takes a lot of work as well, but what we want to do is to show them last year's data, and then also help them think through some opportunities to use that to improve their programs going forward, or maybe say, yeah, we're on the right track. We need to keep working, putting more effort into this area, or whatnot. So Christy actually will be going out, Wyckoff will be going out with Dr. Shefferman this year, going around the state. Usually those take place in September, one-on-one with grantees. It's a great time for grantees to ask questions, to let us know what kind of additional support they could use or their challenges. Also, it's a great time to celebrate with them all of the accomplishments and the outcomes from the previous year. But we like to do those early in the fall, because they're already rolling with kicking off their programs, some of them in June, and then other ones that are maybe more school year based in August. So those will be scheduled, and then the individual reports, and then like Lynn said, she does some coaching calls throughout the year and other things to support them. But the fall visits are pretty important, and they like to have that data. Some of them use it to present to their board, and of course, we really always like them to use it to, while we don't meet with their entire staff, we encourage them to share it with their staff, those that are doing the work with the children and families directly, so that they can work on goals, or help those staff as they move forward into this new year. Christy's been busy onboarding. We have a few new grantees for the Early Childhood Block Grant this year, and those grants started July 1. And so she's been working with Dr. Schafferman as well to help them know what of those measures that you heard about they'll need to be collecting, helping them get the training for that. That's always a little bit of a time that grantees are learning a lot and trying to get onboarded. We have a lot of grantees that have been doing it for many years. And so that first year, it's important to provide them a little bit of extra help so they know where they're going to be entering the data and what they need to be collecting. So they will also get a site visit, even though they don't have a report to look at from the prior year, but they'll get a site visit and probably focus a little bit more on the measures, training, implementation, and how it's going so far, and help troubleshoot anything that is needed. So really exciting time in the fall as grantees get that site visit. In October, you will be hearing from us about a proposal of how we want to, or the process for awarding the next cycle of grants for the Early Childhood Block Grant. So that will be for fiscal year 25, but that we usually kick off some sort of application process in November or December to give us time to review those and make a recommendation, a slate to bring to you in April. So feels like we just wrapped those up, but it's important to for us to have a good timeline for giving them enough time to apply and giving us enough time to review those. So we will bring something to you in October for your approval for how we move forward with that application process. You also heard about the Child Care Accelerator grants, and we are working really hard, as Lucas said, to get all of those set up. The state fiscal year also started July 1, so it's timing has been a little challenging, but we're working hard to get those in place, and so that grantees can start spending that money, and that involves a whole invoicing process and all of that. So it's been busy around here. Melissa and I were talking yesterday about what I was going to share, because she's got some great updates coming, and it's like, we've been busy. That's an update. So it's a busy time of year, but also super exciting as our portfolio has doubled compared to what we were working on a few years ago. We have the preschool development grants now, but then also these new Child Care Accelerator grants, and so it's been pretty cool. So I will turn it over to Amanda.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Amanda Peterson, and I serve as the Director of Early Childhood at the Kansas State Department of Education. And so for the last 5 years, I've been also serving as the designee for the Kansas Commissioner of Education, who's an ex officio member of this cabinet. It's really great to be with all of you. I'm in a place that I'm hoping is relatively quiet and hoping that you can hear me, and it appears that that's the case, so that's terrific. It is, as we all know, the beginning of the school year, and so we are hard at work with school districts as they get ready to start the school year. Many of them over the summer came to the agency to finalize their budgets for the coming school year, and so that's always a really big lift for folks to get complete. And then we also were able to host several hundred administrators in Wichita last week to help bring them together and help them update and learn and prepare for the coming school year. So between those pieces and getting to attend many of the Early Childhood Transition Task Force listening session tours in June, and then getting to visit with superintendents in Oakley and Sublette this week, it's been really terrific to see that in every corner of the state, we really have school districts who are energized to start the school year, who are really creative as they are working together in their communities to tackle childcare and early childhood education and other critical issues for children and families. And it's been, I'll say selfishly, very fun to be able to share updates with schools about things like the Dolly Parton Imagination Library or 1-800-Children or other initiatives that we've been working on at the state level that are now in a place where communities can really pick them up and promote them and get them connected with kids and families. So that has been absolutely wonderful. Because it's the start of the school year, the kindergarten readiness snapshot is in full swing. So we talked about the ages and stages questionnaires earlier. And as a reminder, we also use that same tool, that same developmental screening for all Kansas elementary schools that are accredited by the State Board of Education to partner with the families of incoming kindergartners to complete those questionnaires so that the schools can have a better, build a better relationship with that family and get a better understanding of where that child is at. It is terrific to get to watch all of those screenings come in. Since April 1st, we've had nearly 32,000 screenings submitted statewide. And so we expect that that will increase over the coming weeks and months as schools have until September 20th to partner with families to complete that requirement. And our agency is also partnering with the Kansas Parent Information Resource Center to offer introduction to ASQ training for anybody in the early childhood system who might be interested in learning more about these questionnaires. And those trainings are coming up on August 10th and September 7th. There'll be 3-hour virtual trainings in the morning. And we've been sharing information about those in the All In for Kansas Kids weekly email updates. So we're looking forward to those. The other piece that I wanted to share, we talked quite a bit earlier about, as we were visiting about the ECBG, we talked about different measures of early communication and early literacy, thinking about things like phonemic awareness. At the state level, at the State Department of Education, that's also something that we have been heavily focused on and investing in. And so we continue to encourage schools to take advantage of the opportunity to have their teachers and staff participate in the LETTERS training. LETTERS stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. And it's a really high quality, really intensive professional development program that teaches teachers the science of reading, really the best ways to teach reading in their classrooms. And we've heard great feedback from everywhere from new teachers who are taking the training and learning a great deal to really veteran teachers. I mean, former Kansas Teachers of the Year, people who have been in the field for decades, who have taken the training and said, gosh, there's been some updates in the science and in what we know, and I've taken some useful pieces from this training. So we're encouraging schools to take advantage of those training opportunities because we have been using our federal COVID relief dollars to make that available to educators in the state of Kansas. And so there is a time limitation on for how long the free piece of the training will be available. And so we've really been encouraging folks to take advantage of that. The most up-to-date numbers that we have, more than 7,800 teachers in Kansas are fully trained and are using the LETTERS training. And we're looking forward to that number growing as more and more teachers complete that program over the coming years. I could talk for much longer. We've got a lot going on, but I think those are the pieces that are most relevant to this group. So I'd be glad to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Board members, any questions for Amanda?
This is Deanne. I just want to echo how exciting it is that you are encouraging the LETTERS program and just really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And we so appreciate teachers who are taking the time to participate in it, because it is a 2-year intensive training. It's not something that you can just go to on an afternoon and get knocked out. It's a really intensive program. So we appreciate that teachers are taking the time to do it.
Amanda, do you have pretty well statewide participation in the program? In letters?
We do. We do. We are. We have a number of school districts where more than 75% of their relevant staff have completed the training, and that's really terrific. We have some districts that have really bought in, and we're carefully looking at that data and reaching out to those that haven't had as much participation yet to encourage them to. So
good.
All right. Well, I will turn it over to Dr. Jessie Piper.
We may have caught Jessie off guard. Justice Wall, would you like to step in and give an update from the court system?
Sure, I'd be happy to. First, just by way of introduction for our new chairman, I'm KJ Wall, and I am one of the 7 justices on the Kansas Supreme Court, have been since 2020. I grew up in Scott City, so I'm very familiar with your home turf. My family ran a hardware store there in Scott City and in Dighton for a while before my dad retired. So it's good to see a lot of representation or connection to all areas of our state. In terms of the judicial branch update, just a few items. First, our summer best practices in child welfare law training is about to kick off. Registration is open, and the training will be held on August 22nd. And it's a hybrid meeting, so if you are available and want to be there in Topeka, feel free to do so. Otherwise, we'll have a Zoom option available as well. Anybody interested in registering for that training can certainly contact the Office of Judicial Administration, and their contact information is on the Kansas Court's website. Second update, which I mentioned in June, I believe, is the Child Welfare Summit. Many of you may recall that the court coordinated and kicked off a mental health summit in 2022. And now we're sort of taking that as a model and focusing on child welfare. And we do have the dates nailed down for that summit. It's April 15th and 16th of 2024. And just as a reminder, the summit, involves all 3 branches of government. The activities and the training will focus on preventing children from entering into the child welfare system to begin with, family preservation, and timely long-term permanency planning for those that are in state custody. So if that's within your wheelhouse, please save that date because it'll be here. I know 2024 sounds like a long ways away, but it'll be here before you know it. Finally, I always try and put in a pitch for our Rural Justice Initiative Committee because there is a lot of overlap between the work of the Children's Cabinet and the work that our committee is doing. We are, again, taking the show on the road for our August meeting, and we will be in Great Bend. It sounds like we'll be following your footsteps, Melissa and others who were there very recently. But on the evening of the 24th, we're going to have a community event where all folks will be invited. And then on the 25th, we will actually be conducting our working meeting in Great Bend, and we'll have a great panel of rural attorneys and judges who have chosen to practice in rural Kansas and to sort of help us identify the origins and maybe potential solutions to the shortage of legal services in many parts of our state. So that's all I have in terms of the judicial branch update. But thank you for your time. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right. Thank you, Justice Wall. And though I haven't met you personally, I look forward to that. But I certainly did a significant amount of business with your father, both in Scott City and Dighton.
Yes. Thank you.
Dawn, I think we can circle back to Jesse.
Sorry about that, guys. That was impeccable timing. I had a staff pop in. So Derek asked me, he's been at the conference in DC all week. So he asked me just to give an update on some stuff with them. So continued regulation review, still on that expedited timeline. So what are we looking at? 3 more weeks till they're supposed to be done with things, but it's looking like they're good. Also, he anticipates hiring a new WIC director soon. The conference he has been at has been super, super valuable, lots of connections with DCF, and has learned lots about childcare stuff. So yeah, looks like that's going really well. As far as my side, we've been working on, finding that McV match, which sounds like it's going to happen. And yeah, I think that's really all the updates.
Awesome. Dawn, for your benefit and anyone who might not realize, Derek Flerlog and Dr. Jesse Piper are the co-directors of the Family Bureau at KDHE. So they've divided the different divisions and are a really nice team that we've been working with since early spring. The conference is the reason why DCF is not with us to give an agency report. It's the annual Child Care Development Block Grant state team meeting. So they convened in DC with other states, and DCF is the state lead agency that receives that source of federal funding that supports childcare subsidy, childcare quality improvement, and of course childcare licensing, which would be the reason that Derek and the licensing side of things joined them in Washington this week. So Jesse, you should cheerlead more because that's a big deal. The licensing review is comprehensive. It's a top to bottom review of the child care licensing rules and regulations that has been underway. Our preschool development grant has been helping support some of the manpower necessary to do it on the expedited timeline, and it will be delivered. The list of proposed revisions is on track to be delivered as scheduled in the expedited timeline by Labor Day, Jesse, I believe is what Derek has been sharing publicly.
I certainly do not want to minimize their efforts. They all have bags under their eyes and they're very tired. So yes, definitely don't want to minimize they're doing a lot.
They are, and it's an effort that will help us better align and conform with requirements from the federal side of things, but it's a process that's helping us not just do compliance work, but identify any opportunities for us to better align so we're not creating a mismatch of expectations that make it difficult for providers. It's a way of addressing a number of issues that I think, over the years, the agency has been willing to issue exemptions because there's old language on the books. So we get to update lots of things that have proven to be worthwhile reasons to make special accommodations in various places. We've learned from those. And it's a way, we are looking at the child care ratios. We're looking at the way our state level regulations lay out, that we have awareness of where we have local ordinances that are more restrictive or in ways probably not intended, make it harder to operate childcare at that local level. And so we will come out of this with a good handle on additional layers of reform that could take place. And I think I had a meeting with the chair of the Johnson County Commission, because in that patchwork of local cities, there is a wide discrepancy between local rules and ordinances that make it difficult for providers to navigate. And the county suggested that they can work with the cities in their jurisdiction, but they asked if we could develop sort of a toolkit, a best practice manual, which we think is a great idea, or that we could then use to partner with cities and counties and say, here is, you know, here are some good practices to keep in mind when you're setting your zoning ordinances and all the local rules. But we opted to put that on hold until we have this new menu of state level licensing proposals, so that we work smarter, not harder, amongst our staff that would put something like that together. So just wanted to give that its moment in the sun today, because I know that's been a high priority. I have not seen Matt Billinger on the call, so I think before we move on, if anyone on any of the topics covered, just before we leave the topic of the agency work, are there any other questions?
Well, seeing none, we'll move on ahead to Melissa's report as director. Updates on anything that we haven't covered so far.
We've covered a lot, so I thank everyone that's contributed today and helped keep the cabinet up to date. I mentioned preschool development grant. That is an ongoing grant that we first acquired from, we were awarded in 2019 a one-year planning grant that was used to do the comprehensive statewide needs assessment, and then we used those findings to draft the 5-year strategic plan for early childhood known as All In for Kansas Kids. We have been working as a team with DCF, KDHE, Department of Education, and the cabinet as a team, and we applied for and received a 3-year implementation grant. So we are in the final year. We're actually in a no cost extension phase of that 3-year grant cycle. So by April of 24, that implementation grant will have run its course. We will have spent it down entirely and completed the grant activities that were in our scope. But we also landed a 1-year planning grant in December, right before the end of the calendar year. We were awarded a $4 million planning grant to revisit a comprehensive statewide needs assessment post-COVID. So we did pre-COVID, we did annual updates during the pandemic years so that we could stay on track with what was evolving in the world of early childhood during those circumstances. But we're now able to do to revisit the needs assessment as we exit the COVID era, and we will deliver an updated strategic plan. We also have some other activities that are helping us as state agencies implement some of the strategies and goals that were identified in the original strategic plan. So that work is ongoing. We are in the process of submitting an amendment to our federal project officer to rearrange a couple of the grant activities and get their blessing to adjust the budget just a bit. So it's existing budget, existing projects, but just revising the approach to things. And then they have offered us a every existing PDG grantee in the cycle that we are in was notified that we are getting a supplemental award as they seek to spend down their remaining funds. So we are drafting a plan for that supplemental award that we will submit to the federal project officer. I think it's a great opportunity to strengthen the system. So we'll keep you up to date on that. It was mentioned, Deanne made mention of Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. We appreciated the final work from the state legislature that authorized the cabinet to undertake the drafting of the necessary papers to apply for 501c3 nonprofit status for the Imagination Library of Kansas to serve as our entity. Currently, the Dollywood Foundation serves as our fiduciary partner. They are actually serving. It's similar to the way a donor advised fund would operate, where they are the parent nonprofit organization, but they are keeping accounts for us. So we have a very special celebration. We have kicked off the statewide. We have covered every zip code in the state. So we are celebrating that any family in the state, no matter where they live, is eligible to, they can choose to enroll their age eligible children. So as a reminder, that's birth through 5th birthday. Children are eligible to receive the gift of 1 free book a month mailed to their home. These are high quality children's literature and age and developmentally appropriate offerings. So since we announced statewide enrollment, the Dollywood Foundation has they notified us that Dolly wanted to come celebrate. So August 14th, Dolly herself will be coming for a visit to celebrate with Kansas. The event is private, it's invitation only. It is aimed mainly for the network of local affiliate partners that are our partners in the program and helping support enrollment of kids in their area. So we are really excited with that celebration. And since announcing that, we have seen an increase in the number of children enrolled. The announcement was made on July 21st, and in the first week after that, and really pretty rapidly, we had over 10,400 new enrollees. There is always, every month, children age out. They celebrate their 5th birthday, they get their graduation book and complete the program. So those aren't necessarily net new numbers, but those are actual new enrollments. We are currently sitting at nearly 62,000 children enrolled in the program. So we are really excited about that. I'm also pleased to have identified appropriate legal help to make sure our articles of incorporation are drafted properly. So we are really excited to get on with all of that work. As we have been working feverishly to get the new Child Care Capacity Accelerator grants set up, Amy and Lucas did a nice job of alluding to how much work that has been. Right in the midst of that, we were notified that the cabinet had been awarded a new source of federal funds. We submitted an application in December of 2021 to US Treasury for a fund that was part of the American Rescue Plan. It's being administered at the federal level by US Treasury. It is intended for infrastructure projects. And when the guidance came out, when the Treasury rules were released, the criteria was intriguing to us. It's known as the Capital Projects Fund. The criteria was for construction of community facilities that support work, education, and health monitoring activities. So we drafted a proposal to use, and this is a formula distribution to the states. So Kansas got $143 million in our distribution. I think the original intent at the federal level was for broadband implementation. And I think if the question of where the money the state share is going that isn't coming to the cabinet, I would defer to the recovery office, but I do believe it's being put into broadband projects and already underway because that component got approved last year. But we had an application for $40 million for construction projects. The criteria is slightly different than the Child Care Capacity Accelerator. So we are a little shell-shocked at the timing because it landed so squarely on top of implementing our new slate of grant projects, but we are a dedicated team that is rising to the occasion and making the adjustments that are necessary to RFP criteria to put out a new RFP. We do not have a timeline to announce today, but we are intent on doing this as rapidly as we can so that we can put some more projects together. These will differ in that they cannot be only childcare programs. They need to be community facilities. They need to offer a variety of support services for members of the community, but they can include childcare. So we are focusing, because of our subject matter focus on early childhood, we will make that a piece of the required criteria that a viable childcare program be part of the overall community plan. But we are working to put this RFP together so that we and there were some applicants to the accelerator who were not funded with construction funding in that slate that we are reaching out to invite to see if they can retool, and they're pretty close and we think would be a great fit for this. So more information for this cabinet is coming and potentially could mean some special meetings need to be called through the coming months to present slate proposals for your consideration. But we will be sure to keep you updated and make as much effort to communicate this grant opportunity with the public as we can. We will offer webinars and informational sessions so people understand it and offer the technical assistance necessary to help applicants be successful. We also were approached by the folks putting together the K-State 105 initiative, which is a project that was funded in the state budget this year. The idea is that a team approach to address economic development, especially focused on small business development, but helping to address childcare needs, housing needs, and healthcare needs. So I don't want to get ahead of the work being done by the folks spearheading the 105 initiative. I just want to make mention that they approached the cabinet. We have brought in Childcare Aware as another good partner. Obviously, their own childcare CASITA, the Kansas Child Care Training Opportunities Organization, is already affiliated with K-State. Their folks, their extension folks. So there is a broad team from within the K-State universe, but they're reaching out to outside partners to come in and help partner. A lot of what they envision for the childcare component is very much the work already being done to support community childcare planning and efforts to fundraise and problem solve. So we felt like we're positioned to be a good fit for that as a partner, so that we aren't working at cross purposes trying to achieve the same goals without good communication with each other. So we're excited about potential opportunities on the horizon for that. And finally, I will just mention that we did spend the week of June 26th on the road holding community listening sessions as the governor's early childhood education, or the early childhood transition task force. So we had 9 public meetings across the state. This week I participated in an evening meeting virtually so that we could offer folks that couldn't make it, between the geography and the time of day, we might have been somewhere in the morning for someone who couldn't attend unless it had been later in the day or whatever. So we wanted to make sure there was an opportunity for all voices to weigh in. So we conducted the virtual listening session this week, Wednesday night at 7 p.m. And the feedback is all being synthesized. Our team at KU CPPR assisted with that and turned over notes from all the meetings that we had gathered up to the Hunt Institute. Those findings will be presented to the Early Childhood Task Force itself at our next public meeting, which will be August 17th. So we will be sure to help communicate out more details on that and progress as warranted. So Lindsay, can you put up the meeting slide? And I will point out that all of our meetings are always live streamed, and we have for most of the last 3 to 4 years, we've met virtually. We've tried different options to try hybrid meetings that have not been terribly beneficial to anyone involved. With a new chair, with the work of the governor's task force coming to a head in the fall, with our new strategic plan for early childhood, it feels like the right time to seek to schedule a board retreat so that we meet in person on October 6th as a one-time event. So what I want to discuss with you is the proposal to hold our meeting in the morning in person and then shift into a board retreat for some good workshopping around where we are as a cabinet, what the initiatives that are happening around us might mean for our future, and do some goal setting as a group. And it's a way to maybe get to know each other. Some of us have never met in person due to the timing of appointments and the onset of the pandemic. So I'm hopeful that even though this is a big shift in our approach, that with enough lead time that we could plan schedules to convene for simplicity's sake here in Topeka, and then hold the public portion of the meeting in our regular time slot, beginning at and actually if adjusting the start time to 10 a.m., this is just occurring to me, if that helps with transportation to get to Topeka, I would be willing to let the board entertain a shift in our start time. But the idea is a 9 a.m. morning meeting. We'd bring in lunch and do a retreat together in a private session after that. So I want to open that idea up for board input.
Melissa, this is Delise. Quick question on that day. What time would the end time be for that meeting?
You know, I want to aim to end, if we could consider, once we adjourn the public meeting, we could use lunchtime as an opportunity for the informal, just the conversation to better get to know each other and visit while we had our lunch. And then there will be no actual, in keeping with open meetings requirements, nothing will get voted on. There's no actions that will be taken that require board vote, but it would be a workshop session. We have a speaker we'd like to bring in he's a national expert. Really, it's related to the work of the task force looking at the state governance structure for early childhood. Elliot Regenstein is somebody whose work I have followed for many years. I think he can help us better understand why that might be an interesting approach to things to streamline and align where early childhood programs live. It's a chance for us to hear more about the strategic plan and think about the ways the cabinet might support that work as we seek to strengthen the system. So all in all, it's not a heavy agenda, and my aim would be to end mid-afternoon to let those who need to travel back home. It is a Friday, so I want to be mindful. So I would say, in the 2 to 3 o'clock hour, I would hope that somewhere in there we are ready to take our leave.
Well, speaking as the board member who would have the longest travel time to attend, I would be in favor of keeping the start time at 9 a.m.
Okay.
I know where the Topeka hotels are, and I would be fine with coming in the night before so we can start earlier and finish earlier.
Okay, I appreciate that. And as a reminder, the statute that organizes us allows for board member travel expenses to be reimbursed. We don't pay stipends for board participation, but we do cover travel costs. So we will be able to. That is one of those things that we will let board members work out with Dioga to make necessary arrangements.
Any input from board members? Is this an idea you would like to pursue, or is it going to be problematic for some of you?
Miss Monica.
This is Deanne. Oh, go ahead. This is Deanne. I'm coming from Wichita. That time works fine for me. I might be a little bit, what is the word? When you travel, jet lagged.
Monica, were you gonna weigh in? You're good. Okay.
Yeah, I'm great with that time.
And this is Lietta. I'm great with it too. I think that it's important that we get together. I'm glad to hear this. Thanks, Melissa.
Good morning. I can work with the morning schedule. Unfortunately, I can't do the afternoon due to my clinical schedule.
Dr. Smith, we know that you are a practicing physician and put your patients first always, which is obviously we know no one can quarrel with that. So we appreciate the time you do have to give us.
Yeah, it's Renee. I'm good with the whole day. I think it's great that we could get together and meet face to face. I think that would be a wonderful opportunity.
Excellent. I will work with those board members who are absent to help prepare them as soon as possible so they too can work with their schedules. But I'm excited at this opportunity to meet in person. So stay tuned for a whole lot more information.
All right, good. Does anyone have anything further for the board? If not, thank you all for your attendance and your participation. Thank you for dealing with a new chair as I learn the ropes of this new position and try to learn the acronyms. That'll take a while. It blows me away that Children's Cabinet started as a vehicle to assist the governor and the legislature in allocating the tobacco settlement funds. And this organization, this entity has expanded so much from that beginning. It's really incredible. And that kudos to everyone involved in that process. Anything further from anyone? If not, thank you all. And we'll look forward to seeing you in person. Well, possibly, first of all, with real live Dolly instead of cardboard Dolly on the 14th. And then later on for the regular board meeting on October 6th. Thank you all.